Gentlewoman for Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I love the Courts Committee, and I thank you very much for putting me on it. And I know we get tired of how long some of the meetings can last, but the reasons they last so long is because most of the bills that go to the Courts Committee go to a subcommittee and are looked at and massaged, and hypotheticals come up, and we try to figure out what are all the unintended consequences of the language of the bill, because language matters. Not with this bill. Last year we had a similar bill that did go to a subcommittee, a constitutional subcommittee, and we debated for, I think, 2.5 hours, not only the constitutionality of the bill, and granted the words were different. Not only did we look at the constitutionality, but we talked about unintended consequences and the import of the language. That didn't happen this year. This year, the bill was heard towards the end of a Friday committee meeting when everybody was tired and ready to go home, and everybody had already made up their mind how they were going to vote before they looked at the language. But this bill is rife with unintended consequences. Let me tell you a few of them. Now, the gentleman from Prince William said this is intended to give a cause of action for wrongful death, but it does a little bit more than that. Line 13, the laws of this Commonwealth shall be interpreted and construed to acknowledge on behalf of the unborn child at every stage of development all the rights, privileges, and immunities available to other persons, citizens, and residents of the Commonwealth. What does that mean? Every single code section in the Code of Virginia that talks about a person now has to be construed to take into account that life begins at conception. Now, the bill says that nothing in this section will be interpreted to create a cause of action against a woman for indirectly harming her unborn child, for failing to properly care for herself, or by failing to follow any particular program of prenatal care. But it does open a hospital or a doctor up to more than just a wrongful death suit. Some examples. You remember you heard me talk about the woman pregnant with multiples, whose doctor tells her the chances of all of them surviving are low. But if she reduces the pregnancy to 2, the chances of the 2 surviving are better than 50%. And so now the woman has to make that decision. But now, what if her parents, the grandparents, disagree with her decision? A couple things could happen. They could believe that this situation falls into a child abuse situation and report her for child abuse and neglect. They could call an emergency hearing, have a guardian ad litem appointed for every one of those children, and turn this into not a medical decision between the parents and the doctor, but a situation where you've got to figure out the interests of every individual child. What about a woman who needs to have an amniocentesis done? I was put in that situation, being over 35 and pregnant. The only way to be sure whether or not my child would have certain genetic, the chances of certain genetic diseases, 100% sure, was an amnio. Now, I decided not to have one because the risk of a miscarriage was something I wasn't willing to take. That was my decision in consultation with my husband and my doctor. But again, what if my parents had decided to get involved or disagree? What if I had decided to have the amnio and they disagreed? Do we have to call a guardian ad litem in for the child? What about, there are a million things that can go wrong in the delivery room. A million things. And now, the doctors and the nurses have to worry about not just a wrongful death suit, but assault and battery charges, or battery charges. I don't want my doctor in the delivery room worrying about that. But that could happen under this bill. What about, and I have a friend this happened to, someone whose doctor recommends she has a cesarean section and she doesn't want to. That happens all the time. If you've had a cesarean section, you get pregnant again, the doctors recommend you have a second cesarean section. What if you don't want to? Now, in some states where they've had personhood bills, and yeah, I grant the language is a little bit different, where that's happened, the hospital has called an emergency hearing to determine, for a court to decide, whether that mother's going to have a C-section or not. That could happen under this bill. I could go on and on. Words matter. Unintended consequences need to be thought about. We haven't done that here. And by passing this bill, we are doing much more than giving a cause of action for wrongful death. And you're going to hear from some other people about the impact that this will have on the legality of an abortion and contraception. But think about all those parents with children they want very desperately, but have very difficult decisions that they have to make in consultation with their doctor. Do not insert the state in those decisions, which is what we will do if we pass this bill. Thank you.